Hello, welcome to Friday Leadership Deep Dive. I'm Monica Vegalam. I'm an executive coach, and this is one of the shows I keep showing up every Friday to make some distinctions about leadership drawn from ontological inquiry, Eastern spiritual wisdom, and some coaching modalities. Um, it's spring, and where I live, it's so beautiful. The sun is out, and the leaves are coming back on. It's amazing. And I also have to say, I jumped in before I was ready into this live show. So there's a little bit of like catching my words. Um, okay, let's see. What do we have for today? I want to talk about open loop decisions versus closed loop decisions. But before I do that, I want to quickly check if I'm live and my audio is fine. And if you're watching this, let me know. Okay, looks like there are captions, so I am live. All right. So before we dive in, tell me how is it going for you? Tell me in the comments. How is spring? What new energy are you finding yourself in? What new inspiration are you finding yourself in? For me, it just feels like I am past a big breakdown. I'm on the other side of a big breakdown. When I say breakdown, it's not like a nervous breakdown or like my life broke down or whatever. It's like a kind of an identity shift in which the way I see the world changes. So, growing up, I had this belief somehow that there is this belief I acquired from trying to achieve, trying to come first in the class, or looking at other people getting disappointed in me or not, all of those, that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter what it was. What I acquired the story that it's never going to work, like nothing is ever going to work. So it's like a very silent subconscious story, and certain situations or would trigger the story. As in, if somebody says that, I remember during my coach training, somebody told me, like one of the mentors told me, oh, she's Monica, I know her, she is never going to make um, uh, big business or whatever. And that triggered me a lot. Like she was like, she's never going to be successful. That triggered me a lot because it poked this wound that nothing is ever going to work. But apart from that being a trigger, it just was kind of a like a constant background noise that I would layer on top of, like whatever I do, I would layer on top of that story. So since I believe that it's not going to work, I would always be like on the go. I am going to make it work. Like for everybody else, it's not visible, but I became like this very achievement oriented and driven person who would always make it work, always make results happen. So that got pretty good results in my life. I mean, it's great. But what that leaves me with is like this constant frenzy and low grade anxiety. And like there's like this constant drive and chase to do things. So that I've been in inquiry for quite some time about this now, and it feels like there was a knot that I am past. There were some emotions around it. I processed them, um, and it was like like a story that had a lot of gravity. Like whatever I do, it's not going to work. And I find myself on the other side of it now, as in it's not gone. Our stories never like go away, but it doesn't have as much power, as in it doesn't hook me anymore. So what happens is when we process certain stories like this, we develop a capacity to be with that story. So for me, I have this now, this capacity to recognize it and be with it, and not let it influence my decisions and actions. So that's kind of like where I am finding myself these couple of days. And spring feels especially beautiful because I'm in this place of feeling a lot of freedom and gratitude. You probably notice that in my energy. But what I also notice is like there is an ease in how I do things, the way I write or the way I speak, in the way I be with other people in my life. So that's like the power of transformation, and that's what happens with being in the inner work and looking at that total complicated mess of knots that we have inside us, and looking at how that influences what we do in daily life. So yeah, that's kind of like what I've been with. So tell me what's going on with you. What goals are you going towards? What energy are you finding yourself in? I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments whether you're watching it live or later. So coming to today's topic, closed loop versus open loop decisions. I've been exploring decision making since past couple of videos, and we've been talking about how to refine the decision making process to be more powerful and creative towards whatever it is that you take up, like whatever vision you're trying to bring life into. So, and I think closed loop versus open loop decisions is like an important distinction that creates new possibilities and new options to take on, that will shift how you make decisions and shift the results that you're trying to create, in a good way, in a really, really good way, like in an exponential way, I think. And exponential is something like people kind of like say it out randomly, like you will get exponential results. But exponential results really means that something that you haven't thought is possible becomes possible. And so what that looks like is like if you were aiming for 10% results, you get like, I don't know, 80%, as in 10% sales, you get 80% sales because of the way you changed your decision making. It's like the rudder of a boat, or a ship. If you kind of like turn it a little bit aside, and then you keep kind of changing how you like the small angles in how it goes, the place you arrive at is completely different. Like you might be trying to arrive at I don't know, some Brazil, or wait, what is on the west coast of South America? Is Portugal on the west coast? I'm not sure. My GK is so poor. So, like, okay, somewhere in the west coast of South America, and then you end up arriving at Australia, let's say. So that's like the difference between powerful decisions that, powerful and creative decisions that you make versus the default way of making decisions. Now, what's the default way? To explain that, I want to first look at what I wrote in the description about Jeff Bezos being really obsessed about customer experience. And that turned into a principle, like a leadership principle that they follow. And that resulted in an experience for people where almost like everybody in the US, like general public, prefers shopping from Amazon first before they consider going out anywhere. Now there are like exceptions to this. It's not like the ultimate thing, but it's a pretty big impact that Amazon has. So how that was possible was because in the initial years, Jeff Bezos was like customer experience over profits, over short term results, long term thinking over short term results. So, this focus on customer experience, I call this an open loop decision making. And the default way is to focus on this quarter's result. So, this closed loop of decision making uh, uh, is kind of like solving past problems. So it's the difference between solving past problems versus opening up to new future. Stick with me here. It feels a little bit abstract, and it will become clear as I give certain more examples. I have some notes here, and I'm kind of like looking at them to make sure I cover everything, but that's actually disturbing me. So let's see. Most the way of being human is that we love status seeking games. We love surviving. The like just like I want food, just like I want water. My ego wants certain status, and that's how it thrives and survives. Unfortunately, this is even though we don't want that in certain situations, it comes and we act from that place. I'll tell you how that came up for me when I was a new coach. When getting a client meant a lot to me. Like when somebody signed up, it was a really like a success, right? Yes, I'm on track for this year. I'm going to have this client make this much money, and this year is going to be great, and all of that stuff. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. It's very essential that I have goals, and sustaining myself means that I work with people, I get clients, and I put myself out there, and all of that stuff. But what that does unconsciously is that there is like this constant chase to get clients, to meet my goals. When I do this, is that resulting in going towards my goals or not? What do I like? Every day I sit down at my desk and I'm like, what do I do to meet my goals? This is so essential, by the way, that we have specific goals and we are moving towards them, we are tracking them. That is completely essential. And even in my coaching practice, I have people track their projects, track their milestones. Are you moving towards them or not? Have metrics and all of that stuff. That is quite important. But the place I come from towards that is very uh, is also important, and it goes unexamined. If we don't kind of like look at who we are being about our goals, the decisions we make come from a place which is not very powerful. It leaves us with a disempowered experience of life. It left me with like the same attitude that I had when I was a full-time employee, like going towards that next promotion. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then that, like, am I meeting my manager's expectations or not? And when I am a solopreneur, am I meeting my expectations or not? Am I meeting my project's expectations or my project's goals or not? So that leaves me with this constant like burnout, like disappointment, dissatisfaction, that that low grade anxiety all the time. And it's very silent. It doesn't like occur as if there is something at all, unless somebody comes and points out, like my husband comes and says, hey, are you worried about something? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm worried about how I'm going to make some progress tomorrow. So there is like that thing that takes us away from presence, from being present and enjoying life in the moment and enjoying the journey, because our mind is kind of locked on the future outcome. So the decisions we make, um, what happens with this way of being is that my whole mind is kind of like centered around that outcome that I have, and centered around that problem I'm solving, and my decisions come from that place. What that leaves me with is like an experience of constant chase. That's my default state, right? And your default state might be completely different. But I would say it would fall in similar um, category of, I want to look good. I want to have this thing that I couldn't have before, like looking towards the past. There's always like this subconscious story that we are problem solving for when we come from a finite, like a closed loop target, and making decisions from that place. So, wanting to get a client for me is not a bad thing, but how I'm approaching it is kind of a past problem. What I mean by that is that at the start of this show, I was telling you about the breakdown I was in, right? Like, it's never going to work. There's like this subconscious story. And if I'm taking my decisions from that place, so if I say, hey, I want a client, or this is my goal, what happens is I'm operating on top of that story. So, hey, this is the goal I have. And then this story immediately says, no, you can't have that. That's not possible. So then I'm like, I'll work extra hard to make that possible, and then be in that chase. And that energy shows towards whenever I talk to people. And inadvertently, people like sense that energy, and they're like kind of not very attracted to the prospect. So the being of a coach is kind of examining the stories and the energy that I come from, and then letting that go. And I would assert that as a leader, or any professional, right? If you change the way you're being towards your goal, like when you don't come from the stories, you come from a different place, which I call the infinite way of being. I'll talk more about that in a second. When you come from a different place, your decisions are drastically different, more powerful, more creative. So how that changed for me is now that like I constantly work on those stories, there is like this there is a process called distinguishing what's going on for me, how I'm approaching some how I'm approaching a goal. When I do that distinguishing, a new possibility opens up from where I can make a different decision. I'll tell you what that looks like. But before that, I want to talk about the process of distinguishing. So I'm reading this book called Speaking Being. This one, I think I've mentioned it in the last live show as well, if you have watched it. But no problem if you haven't. This is like a book about a certain series of workshops done by this guy called Werner Erhard, who is like the father of ontological coaching and inquiry. So it says here, in the workshop, he says this: I don't see with my eyes, I see with my mouth. That is to say, I see with language. Things occur as they occur because of language. What distinguishing is to take something like an undifferentiated mass, and to bring forth from that mass a realm of possibility. Distinction gives existence, it makes existence possible. That's like, that's so powerful. But also we can't like just understand it with like our current way of thinking, right? It requires a different way of seeing to see what he's pointing to. He says, I don't see with my eyes, I see with my mouth. as in I see with my language, as in when I look at what's in front of me, I know a webcam is a webcam because I have a word called webcam. Otherwise, it's just a mass of black, blue, and my screen here right now has white. And I have a laptop in front of me, a mic in front of me, I have a window here. All of that I am able to see because I have language for it. Now, similarly, if we don't have language for what's going on inside our heads or inside of our default programming, it remains like a blurry, undistinguished mass where automatic behavior comes from. The reactions happen, not responses. So, what he's talking about is that distinction gives existence. So if we are able to distinguish and kind of lay everything on the table and give language to what is happening in our psyche, we a new possibility opens up for us from which we can operate. We can show up differently. So he also says this: the effectiveness of someone who can deal from the whole, and all that means is having the distinction, is very different from someone who has all the parts. So operating from the whole means that you are able to make more objective decisions than if you're operating from one of the parts. What does operating from the whole look like? That means that in your psyche, you are able to distinguish, okay, this is my fear, this is my desire, these are my emotions, this is my default frame of thinking, this is how I generally listen by default, and this is how I act, and this is kind of how I ensure my survival. This is how I by default respond to people, whether that's from anger or judgment or whatever that is. And what else? This is how I make meaning out of things, and these are my stories from childhood or stories that run in my unconscious. When you kind of lay all of that out and give language to it, what happens is that there is a new capacity to operate from a different place. The distinction itself gives existence to things and to a new possibility. So, one of the things that comes up here in the book is about being human. Being human means that we automatically behave to look good, to be right, to kind of ensure that I survive and I compare to others and I survive. Like if anybody comes and tells me that, no, 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 I don't care about what people think about me, I don't believe that. Because being human means that we care about what other people think. And it's completely okay. It's just that once you're able to isolate that part of yourself and kind of like examine that, oh, these are the things I do to look good and to kind of project a certain image of myself, to be a good leader, to be a good professional, to for me to be like a excellent coach that everybody wants to hire. So when I'm able to kind of isolate those parts of me, I become more in touch with who I am. And I don't need to put up this false image that no, 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 this is who I am and you need to like respect me. Like I don't act from that place. So I don't play those status seeking games anymore. And I can be really authentic and say that these are the things I can do, these are the things I'm working on, and these are the things I don't want to do. So then my decision making becomes much, much more clear. So let's see. Let me see what else I have here. Okay, now let's talk about open loop decision making. So, taking that example of Jeff Bezos talking about customer obsession and having that as a principle, right? It doesn't matter what their current goals are. Their the organization's way of being is that we prioritize customer experience over anything else. If any issue comes up, okay, what is the experience of the customer here, by making this decision versus that decision, right? So then there are like certain choices, new choices become available because I want to make sure that I give a good customer experience. So that is their infinite game of that, or that is their infinite way of being. As when I say infinite, it's not closed, it is opening up a new future. It's not about this particular target, it's about my relationship to how to anything, like my relationship towards getting results is dictated by this particular way of being. So what I'm essentially saying here is that if you want to refine your decisions and become little more powerful and little more creative about the choices you make, find your infinite way of being first. That means you don't solve the past problems, but you open up to new possibility. Okay, how do we do that? We do that by first examining how we are by default. As in, what is my current frame of thinking? What is my current frame of listening? What is my current frame of acting? Actually, I'll give you my own personal examples of what I have distinguished as my current frames of all of these things. Give me 1 second. Yeah. So my default frame of thinking is that I need to figure out or I don't know. So everything that I like try to solve comes into this particular bucket. Um, let's say I want to write an article. I automatically kind of like, let's say I get up and I say, okay, today I'm going to write an article. The first process that I get into, like the default process, and it occurs in like nanoseconds or whatever, I'm like, I need to figure that out right now. So that means when as soon as the thought comes, okay, I'm going to write an article, I go into figuring out what I want to say in that article in that moment. And then what happens? Always when we have one side of the thinking, there is like an opposite side of thinking that we arrive at as well. So the opposite side of it is I don't know. Okay, so like it's like I have it figured out or I don't know. There is this dichotomy that I get into. So when I sit down to write, I'm like starting the process, I'm writing, and at some point I'm like, I don't know how this works. I don't know anything. Remember my story, nothing is going to work, and that comes in and I just give up. And of course, I don't know any of this stuff when I'm actually sitting there writing. All of this I'm able to see when I'm in conversation with my coach. Like, oh, yeah, that happened. I didn't know that at all. So when I take up practices to notice what's going on, that's when I distinguish like, oh, this I need to figure out is ruling my life everywhere. So that is one example. So what happens is like I create creativity from this, as in I try to know something beforehand, even before I sit down to create it. Like, how do you create something new when you already know that, right? That doesn't work. We can't create creativity. It's not a very powerful way to approach creativity, or powerful frame, I mean. If I just sit down and kind of be more in exploration of what do I want to say and connect the dots, the output becomes much better and I'm more satisfied with it. So writing is like one example that I'm giving, but it's like everywhere. I can see in relationships as well, in the way I approached courses. When I took a course, or when I would join any program, I would join with the attitude that I need to figure out. So if I didn't have that belief, or if I was able to at least be aware of that belief, I wouldn't even probably join the course. So see, it's a completely different, I would have made a completely different decision if that didn't hook me. So it's so important to figure out what your frames are. This is one frame of thinking. The other frame, I also noted down a frame of listening. I always listen almost with, how can I use this? So even as you're listening to me talk, you might have certain thoughts come up, and there is a frame in which all of those thoughts belong. For me, that's like, how can I use this? If somebody is speaking, immediately a process goes in my head in terms of, okay, I'm going to use this concept that they just told me and explain it to somebody else this way. It's a really funny process when I actually look at it. And it's now, while I'm distinguishing these things, it doesn't mean that they're bad or they're not useful at all. They are useful and appropriate in certain situations. But the problem comes when I always make decisions from those places, as in, these things kind of hook me. So then there is a framing of relationship, framing of positioning, as in, frame of positioning, as in, when I talk to the other person, what frame am I coming from? So that frame for me is like, I'm not good enough, but I'm better than you. So I'm able to laugh about this, but this really hooked me for many years. Like, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And I would feel that, and then I'm like, I know that story, but how come in my conversations there is friction? That's because I feel, I instantly kind of have a hierarchy about with the other person, as in, sometimes I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I know better than you. So, and this wouldn't show up as much in with people outside, but in close relationships, this would show up a lot, and that would lead to certain judgment and friction, and how twisted relationships can get if somebody comes from a frame of, I'm better than you. It's not that my relationships have been bad or anything. It's just kind of like, the conflicts and the cycle of conflicts and cycle of arguments or upset come because I show up from this place instead of recognize that and show up from a different place, which is, for me, connection and being in relationship. So then there is the frame of acting. So I have told you about frame of thinking, listening, frame of relationship, frame of acting. So frame of acting is, I don't want to make any mistake, or it's not going to work, which I kind of talked about a little bit ago, like a few minutes ago. So I guess, like, what I'm trying to say is that our closed loop decisions happen because we come from these frames of experience that we have acquired growing up, getting socialized. When we come from these frames of, I also call them contexts, but for this discussion, let's keep the word frame. When we show up, or when who I'm being about my results or about the goals I want to achieve is coming from these frames, I almost always make closed loop decisions. It's very short term thinking. Short term thinking is useful and appropriate when I have to put out fires, when I have to handle certain problems, when I have to deal with something urgent and important. Sure. But a sustainable, joyful life happens when I focus on long term thinking and play infinite games. So, open loop decision making comes from distinguishing the current frames of thinking. Step one. That's the step one. Once you have laid out all the frames of thinking, listening, acting, and all of that, next step is to formulate an infinite life game or infinite way of being. As in, if I if I practice connection whenever I feel like I'm better than the other person, so I notice, hey, right now I'm feeling like I'm better than this person. That is there. I can see it. Can I practice? But right now, I'm committed to practicing connection, connecting with the other person. And then I'll come from that place. I lean from that place. And when I do that, my approach to the conversation completely changes. Then my results change. You can imagine if a leader is acting like, oh, I'm better than all these people, I have a different, better perspective. Like they don't consciously do that, they unconsciously do that. I'm pretty sure, like you see leaders like that. When they do that versus they come from, I want to come from a place of creating a culture where everybody can speak up or everybody's voices are heard, or some people have objections to that. um, let's say they come from a place of, I want to preserve a relationship with this person. And when they come from the place of relationship versus, I need you to get this result done right now by this Friday, you can be rigorous from a place of relationship, and you can be rigorous from your existing default frames. The latter, which is when you become rigorous from the default state, what happens is there's like this energetic push, people push back, and the results you want may or may not happen, and the experience that you want of the results may not be joyful. That's when we end up with, oh my god, everything is out of control, nobody is listening to me, and everything is uncertain, I don't know what to do, like all those anxiety sort of behaviors. I'm looking at my notes here. Okay, so the second step is formulate an infinite way of being. What are some examples of infinite way of being? And this I'm talking about personal, not business. So for business, it's customer obsession. Customer experience is how we be about how we get results. So the infinite way of being personally could look like connection, relationships, partnership, authenticity, let's see, passion. Like different people have different they arrive at different ways of being, but it's important that you figure this out, as in not just like figure it out, but like resonate, like find that resonance with what is really important to you. For me, giving going back to my example of client creation or working with clients, what's the place I want to come from is making having relationships with people. Now some of them can be clients, some of them may not be clients, but how I want to live my life is having some really nice close relationships with people, friends, family, even business. It doesn't mean that I won't be professional in my business or professional with clients, but the way I approach how I talk to clients and the experience I give them completely changes when I come from this frame. So usually in calls, right, I'm able to see, oh, they are operating from this story. And if I come from my default frame of either like I don't know, or I need to figure this out, or I'm better than you, what happens is, hey, you are doing this thing, that's not the way to do it. And what that does is give like this energetic experience of you are wrong, you don't need to do this, you should not be doing that. That's kind of like the energetic experience they get. That's not what I want to create. What I want to create is relationship. So when I come from a place of relationship, hey, I am noticing this, what are you seeing, or how does that land? Like there's a completely different energy about it, and they feel like I'm partnering with them instead of I'm throwing advice at them, or I'm throwing pointers at them, or saying that you are being this way, which is completely wrong. And the way I write emails changes. I don't, when I have some people come to me asking for coaching, I don't coach them because I want them as a client. I coach them um, because I want them to get to their goals. These are two completely different places, and but very subtle difference. So there's something I practice called coach beyond the yes or no. So it doesn't matter to me whether they are a yes or a no to me, I still coach them. And I think that's a very powerful experience to give to anybody who interacts with me. Now, this sounds like whole salesy stuff, and it can get that way, but that's not my intention at all here. My intention is to show where how you can approach your own profession or work from a different place, from an infinite way of being. So now in my business, there are still goals that I want to have these many clients, or I want to conduct these many workshops, or whatever that might be. But the outcome doesn't determine how happy or how depressed I am, because I come from this place that I want to create relationships. So every day, my measure of success is how much did I come from that place instead of my default frame. And let's say someday I'm just like so low, I don't have capacity, and I go back to my default behaviors. That's okay too, because that's sometimes useful and appropriate. And I'm just like, I don't have capacity right now. That's like being human. That's okay. But when I'm able to um, the difference is that I make a choice about it. I'm able to be at choice instead of react from an unconscious behavior. So when people say um, I don't get to the end of my to-dos, I want to get to the end of my to-dos, then I tell them, getting to the end of your to-dos is a finite game. You're making closed loop decisions, which is you're solving a past problem of proving that you're reliable to someone, I don't know who, versus opening up a new future for yourself or the life you want to create. So instead of closing your to-dos, like the action can be same, how can you show up from a different place towards your to-do list? To-do list is a very microcosmic instance of the bigger problems that we try to go towards the goals we have, the results we want to get, the promotions or the job, a particular type of job we want to get. So always, okay, always is not the right word, but really figure out, really sit and inquire, what is the infinite way of being I want to be? So it takes away the urgency, the chase, the anxiety about getting to goals or not getting to goals. And I really intentionally don't mean that you don't plan and you don't have milestones. All of that is important. You don't like aim for promotions. No, that is important too. You don't, I don't mean that you don't have sales targets or number of customers acquired. All of that super important. First have that plan, and then from there, instead of going to your default way of thinking about goals and plans, what is a different way of being you can come from towards those goals. It's kind of like very tricky. We fall into our own mind traps and the current thinking. And that's why getting help from a coach is, or a teacher is really helpful, who can point out that, and help you with certain practices so that you can arrive there. Okay, then once you kind of formulate an infinite way of being and figure that out, step three is practicing. That's where uh, I would say the first and second steps, which are like becoming aware of your current default frame of thinking, and second, formulating an infinite way of being, both are tricky. This is also tricky because the way our mind operates is that there is an end place I'm going to reach, right? So I might think that there is one day where I'll be amazing at creating new relationships, new friends, and instantly connecting with certain people, and also knowing what to say to make them feel welcomed and ki- like be in connection with me. So there is like a perfect state that my mind wants. But perfection is an illusion. Like an end game is an illusion our mind creates to kind of ensure certainty. So being in the practice of choosing this infinite way of being again and again and again is another game in itself. And approaching that from a context of practice is so important, because I often like go into calls with my coach, and he points out like, oh, it looks like you're triggered here a little bit. And I'm like, oh damn, that thing again. Oh, that's because first of all, it's I'm not acknowledging that being human means that we get hooked into our default programming, and then my mind uses that to get frustrated about myself and reinforce the stories that I have. That means that, oh, I'm not practicing my infinite way of being, so it's not going to work. So like I use whatever is there to reinforce whatever is there, the default frames. So that's why it's important to have like a practice, a context of I am practicing this way of being. Now all of this requires something, as in it requires commitment. It requires courageously looking at yourself and saying, yeah, I do that. I seek status, I avoid emotions, I want promotions because I want to look good, I want recognition. Like actually being authentic um, about what we want, and being straightforward about our desires, about our fears, about our emotions is so important, because you can't leave a place that you have never been to. This is something my coach says all the time. And if we don't touch the places that we unconsciously operate out of, we cannot leave them. Going back to what I read, the uh, effectiveness of someone who can deal from the whole is very different from someone who has all the parts. So this also means that if you come, unless you acknowledge all the parts that you have, you cannot become whole and operate from the whole. Your effectiveness is much different. So when I prioritize relationships, my infinite way of being, the decisions I make are completely different. And it creates new possibilities with people. And that is the takeaway I want you to have from today. Let's see. In summary, don't always solve past problems. Open, make decisions. Okay, don't make decisions from past problems. Make decisions towards future possibilities. Second, get aware and note down, almost like, and become really aware of your fears, emotions, desires, and frames of thinking, listening, acting, all of these default frames. Then third, find an infinite way of being. If you kind of like go through that process, and this is how the process of transformational coaching works as well. Many people ask me, well, you haven't been in a leadership position, how are you able to be a leader? This is how, like, when we have all of this laid out on the table and have people practice a different way of being in their team, in their organization, and towards even their life, work life balance, or being with their kids, or um, however, like, we change the how they show up. When how we show up changes, our cognitive capacity increases, because we are no longer hooked by the default frames. And when that happens, that's when we get these results that we thought were impossible. As in, I want to be surrounded by high performers who make amazing decisions. I want to lead them. That can happen. I want to lead my team through chaos. I want to be the stand and the pillar that everybody kind of feels grounded by when everything is so quick moving in tech, and when things are so turbulent. But it seems impossible right now. This is how you examine your current frames of thinking, you find your infinite way of being, and you practice that, and you make decisions from your infinite way of being, not from your past problems. Past problems is childhood problems and default ways. All right, so that's all I have for today, and thank you so much for hanging out. And my invitation is to come to a conversation with me if any of this resonated with you. I'm doing decision making process reviews. I'm offering like 50 of those for free. So I hope if this was useful, any of this was kind of like, okay, I kind of understand and I want to go a little bit deeper into that, I invite you to come send me a DM, or follow more of my live shows. And I hope that you are able to make open loop decisions, more open loop decisions versus closed loop decisions in your life. Have a great weekend. Reach out, say hi, tell me what landed, tell me what didn't land. And I'm much more active on Twitter these days compared to LinkedIn. So find me there, say hi. This is my handle, Monica_V8. That's all. I'll see you next Friday. Have a great weekend. Bye.